Hello and welcome to the Sound Up Seattle podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Seattle and Washington sports. I'm your host, Tyler Cartwright, joined as always by my co-host,
John Carey.
And we are here today breaking down a lot. This is kind of our peak season. We've been in it since basically the start of October with baseball as well as football going on, and now we've got college basketball, hockey's in full swing. So a lot going on today. We are going to get right into it. Anything to say specifically, John, before we get started?
Just what a wonderful and hard to keep up with time of year. We've got about 5 more weeks before we'll be through with college football and soccer. But until then, we just have like 6 or 7 sports to juggle. So if we don't give your particular team or sport the time you think it deserves, we're sorry. We're doing our best. Gosh, there's a lot going on.
Yes, follow the Twitter for some, instant reactions to see, the Jorge Polanco opt-out, things like that. Like, we'll discuss those, but on Twitter likely because, like I said, there's so much going on, so much to say. And so, as always, before we say anything else, a little Coyote Picnic.
Been a while since I left this town. All the people.
All right, John. Let's get started. Luckily, the Seahawks do not play this week. They've won one of their last 5 games. They don't play this weekend, but we have to talk about this Rams-Seahawks game. Give me your initial reactions. Like, it went into overtime. It felt like a closer game. What were your thoughts as you were watching it?
My thoughts were, one, I guess I had 3 main points. One main point was this Rams team is a lot better than it was to start the year. Don't look at their record and think that's indicative of who they are as a team. They have their 2 best receivers back, who are 2 top 20 receivers in the NFL, and they are dangerous. So a disappointing loss, and we can talk about the greater scheme, how frustrating it was, but not a horrendous loss. This is a good Rams team. Take 2, this was kind of the classic, quintessential pros and cons Geno Smith game that just leaves me shaking my head a little bit and thinking about some other things. And then 3, and maybe most importantly in the short term anyway, is this was the Jackson Smith and Jigba breakout game.
Yes.
This is the game we have been waiting for since drafting him early out of Ohio State. We knew he had this kind of performance in him, and boy, was he electric. 7 receptions, 180 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Dominant performance by Jackson Smith with DK Metcalf out of the lineup.
Yeah, full agreement there. I tweeted during the game. I was like, if we win this game, this is going to be like the start of the JSN era in Seattle. Yeah. Like, even with, I think he kind of took on a little bit more of the DK role in this game. But even with DK returning at some point, I didn't think that JSN would have taken a step back. Like this was his breakout game. So that was really exciting to see. On another note, the Rams obviously have their 2 wide receivers back, but it was tough because Puka Nacua comes out in the first quarter, I believe. Definitely first half. I don't remember if it was first or second quarter. After throwing a punch stupidly at a Seahawks player with a helmet on. But it just, like, him being out felt like the Rams really struggled from, like they were very dominant early on. I think obviously at half they were up 13-3. And it really showed, and their lack of that secondary weapon really was present in the second half and really gave the Seahawks the opportunity to come back. I think with both of those receivers, you're right, this team looks so different and is so much more dangerous, and they really probably would have put us away, which does not bode well for the future of this Seahawks season, but we can get a little bit more into that later. I want to touch on Geno Smith as well. 3 interceptions to 3 touchdowns. He really had his moments of, like, greatness and his moments of just pure abysmal play. I think 2 touchdowns in the red zone, or not touchdowns, interceptions in the red zone. Really tough there for Geno, and it felt like it was a little bit on this offensive line not giving him enough time, and a little bit on him just like trying to do a little too much. Maybe the Seahawks could have settled for a couple field goals here instead of those interceptions, and Geno throws the ball out of bounds. Yeah, it went to overtime. Geno throws the ball out of bounds, and you just needed one more field goal instead of those instances. And so, this is a game where we definitely lost the turnover battle, and that definitely sealed the deal for us.
Yeah, 2 interceptions in the red zone is unexcusable. I understand that the ground game did not get going as much as we would have liked. Kenneth Walker, 25 carries for only 83 yards. They were trying to get the ground game going, but less than 3.5 yards per carry is pretty abysmal in the NFL. And Geno just has to be smarter, man. It's kind of ironic because it's more of a field flip, but if you're on your own 25, if you're on, the 50 and you're trying to be aggressive pushing the ball down the field, I'm more accepting of interceptions in that position. When you are in field goal range, when you're there in a tight game against a division opponent, you can't throw interceptions. You just can't. Take the points, get out of there. Make a good decision. Don't try to force anything too tight. And yeah, he did that a couple times. Obviously, he finished with 363 yards, so he did a good job attacking through the air, particularly to JSN. But the decision-making is just not where we need it to be from this guy. Especially when, if we want somebody to come and throw for 350 and 3 picks, let's get Sam Howell in. Like, that's the Sam Howell MO. But when you have Geno in, you're expecting a little more composure and some better decision-making, and he was not there. Just got a shout-out to Marcus Robinson on the Rams. It's a good call with the loss of Puka. They were really struggling, but he was a huge factor in the third and fourth quarter and in overtime, obviously, catching the game-winning touchdown. 94 yards and 2 touchdowns for DeMarcus Robinson. I'm not sure if that says more about him or more about Matthew Stafford, the ancient one, and his ability to just get the ball to guys, whenever he needs to.
Yeah, I think it says a lot about Stafford as a guy. He's always been super good at spreading the ball out, even in the last few weeks when they didn't have Kupp and Nakua. Like, he was able to spread the ball to 18 different guys, it feels like, over the last 4 games. So it's always been good to watch him, kind of the pro's pro at quarterback. I want to touch on kind of my next big point. This Seahawks, as they're being coached, I think looking at the Pro Football Reference page for the Seahawks team, the one thing that really sticks out, you're like, okay, this is an above average offense, a top 10 offense generally by yards, by points. That's kind of how they've performed. It's a top 20-ish defense. It's really not that great. Maybe sits somewhere around 25 on a bad day. And then you look at the number of penalties. And the Seahawks defense has the second most penalties in the NFL, and the Seahawks offense has the most penalties in the NFL on both sides of the ball. I think, let me pull it up real quick. Offensively, they have 74 penalties for 571 yards on the season. And then defensively, I believe they have 71 penalties, 71, sorry, for another 582 yards. It's just like they're so high above average. If they were just an average type team with these types of penalties and these kinds of mistakes, I feel like we could see a lot of greatness from this team, but they're starting at 1st and 15, 1st and 20. I feel like every single time they get the ball, and at least once on every possession. And so when that happens, it's that much more of a hurdle to get this offense going. You can get the yards, but if you get 20 yards, you're still barely getting that first down. And then it just happens all over again. So I think something needs to happen here coaching-wise where they just need to be more disciplined. And I don't know if that's coming from Mike McDonald. I don't know who needs to teach these guys that. But this is kind of the big difference that I've seen in the Seahawks this year. They're just not disciplined compared to the teams of years past.
Yeah, being top 3 on both sides of the football in penalties is very frustrating. And defensively, I think this fits squarely on Mike McDaniel's shoulders. He needs to be doing a better job. Mike McDonald, not Mike McDaniels.
We know what you meant.
He needs to, coming from the Ravens, who played the cleanest brand of aggressive defensive football in the history of football. Like, it's so hard to walk the line they walk of being aggressive without, committing penalties defensively. He should be the guy to teach this team how to walk that line. And I was never going to judge him year one coming from where he came from. It's always hard going from coordinator to head coach. I still really like him. But that's a failure on his part for this year to get his side of the football, his specialty, playing cleanly. That needs to happen. Offensively, I don't have the stats in front of me, but I'm very confident that 90% of what you're seeing there, it's offensive line penalties. Yeah. And it's one more aspect of the same problem we've been talking about all year. You don't invest in your offensive line. It's not just that your running game gets hurt. It's not just that your passing game gets hurt in all these various ways. But you also see it in all the false starts and all the offensive holdings that have been called on this team constant. And the fall starts, you can get that disciplined. You can, get the whip out and get that in shape. Offensive holding, that's largely a factor of your guys are getting beat and they're like, okay, well, I can either hold or we can take the 8-yard sack. So I might as well hold and we at least save it
Try
down.
and get away with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Either get away with it or, you still save it down and lose 10 yards. So, offensive holding, it's always like, oh, why did you hold there? 90% of the time, it's like a business decision to commit the hold. So that's really just a factor of they're getting beat constantly left and right on the offensive line. And it's not a surprise because they don't invest in the offensive line. So it's a great note. Defensively, that surprises and frustrates me. Maybe youth is a factor or, just a new head coach. But offensively, that doesn't surprise me at all because most of that's coming from the line, and that has been a problem point all year.
Yeah, offensive line-wise, I think that is something that has stemmed from injuries. We've seen it, this is our second or third string guy at basically every position, it feels like. So hopefully we can get just health to come back to the roster and get the starters in there. But for now, it's definitely something that the Seahawks have been dealing with and are trying to fix, as I'm sure they know. Mike Macdonald, it's an interesting point to be made in terms of how he's going to be able to get this defense to stop with the penalties, because I feel like that's something that has been spread out. We've seen a lot of holding penalties on outside, like defensive backs and safeties and things like that. So I feel like that is something that maybe they're trying to be a little bit more cheeky with and be aggressive in the sense of like, okay, hey, grab this guy. Like you can't just let him go in front of you. Like do something. It's kind of like in basketball. Like you can't just let this guy walk through the paint and without taking an elbow. Like you just have to be a little bit more sturdy there. And so maybe they're not getting away with those. I also think defensively, it's hard for Mike Macdonald as a guy who has a business background. He doesn't necessarily have a football background. It's hard for him to like relay that information. I'm sure these guys are hearing that information from them where like, go check this guy, grab his jersey, like be aggressive. I don't know that Mike Macdonald is the guy giving them that information. And I don't know if he's the guy that should be telling them like, hey, we need to be fixing this, and this in that regard. Like, I just don't know. I don't know what the fix is there. Obviously, the defensive guys got to respect their head coach and respect what's coming from him. But at the same time, it's like he's so young and there's a level of trust that these guys have yet to gain from him that I think that's probably part of the issue there.
Yeah, that's completely fair. Hawks in a tough spot, coming off another loss. A lot of close losses to good teams, but it doesn't do anything for you.
Yes.
They went from 3-0 and top of the NFC West. They're now 4-5 in sole possession of last place in the division. Cardinals are one game above, and Rams and Niners are both 500. So it's been precipitous this fall. And I think we said last week that we needed to win 2 of the 3 against our 3 division opponents. That's starting with a loss. We're going into a bye week, and then we got Niners Cardinals. So there's an opportunity to get it back, but we're going to need both. But unless you want me, putting a candle on this season.
This is going to be big to see how this team can perform with a bye week. Like we're going to see how McDonald, takes his approach with an extra 7 days.
They need the bye back.
Yeah.
This team going from 3-0, one out of their last 6. Yeah, no team in the NFL needs a bye as bad as the Seahawks team.
Yes, and having just gotten kind of smacked around by the 49ers, like this is their chance to review tape, see how they can do against this team before what will likely be one of the toughest games of the season. Still,
probably
the first game against the Niners.
Game. Yeah,
like this is the most important one. If they go 4-6, like you're looking at this team maybe not breaking 7 wins.
Correct.
Yeah. So we'll talk more about this game next week, but for now, it just sucked to see all of the kind of Seahawks inefficiencies and still take it to overtime. They had a chance to win. They had the ball in overtime and they turned it over on downs. Like kick a field goal. You're at the 30-yard line. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Very frustrating. Yeah, bummer to lose on a touchdown when they didn't even need a touchdown to win. It's the kind of insult to injury, but it is what it is.
Yeah.